There's Just Something About Kansas City is brought to you by the generosity of our friends with the Haverty family, the Illig family, the Kearney Warnell Foundation, UMB Bank trustee, the Sherman family, the Cockrell family, Don and Mary Doherty, and the Bergman family. Thank you.
Hey folks, welcome once again to There's Just Something About Kansas City, all about the people, places, and things that make this such a great place to live and raise a family and work. Don't forget, we are on Spotify and YouTube, everywhere, all the platforms. And also, I talked about YouTube, so you can watch it. And this would be a great episode to watch because sitting directly across from me today is the one and only Jim Cosgrove. And you're looking at him and say, that's not his name. He's Mr. Stinky Feet.
You got it.
How are you,
Absolutely.
Jim?
Oh, I'm doing fabulously.
How are you?
Thank you.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the Mr. Stinky Feet thing.
Oh,
but you've really had a long and winding road and ended up being so successful. You've got the books, you've got the discology, you've got the not a novel, but you have the book Ripple, Long Strange Search for a Killer, which is a true crime story about a local family. And so we'll delve into that too. But
good. There's a lot.
There is a lot here.
It's been great.
There's a lot. Let's talk a little bit about born and raised here.
Yes,
correct?
Born and raised in Brookside, and the youngest of 8, and a big Irish Catholic family, which was, Brookside was riddled with huge Irish Catholic families at the time. So.
Yeah, when I first moved here, we lived in Brookside. You went to St. Peter's, I think, right?
Did,
elementary?
Yes.
And my son, Garrett, my oldest son, went to St. Peter's for kindergarten.
Oh, yeah.
It was just, that was it. And then we ended up moving from Brookside to Waldo, which is a typical move, for a lot of people.
I lived there as well.
Yeah, there you go. I think you probably lived in a few places.
Yeah.
And then they went to St. Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah.
At that point. So, and then moved to Overland Park. But that's our story. But yours, you stayed right there, right, the whole time?
Well, we, and my wife and I had our first house in Waldo. And then we had an opportunity to move into my mom's old house in Prairie Village. And so it was one of those things where she was vacating her house, and she's like, hey, if you want it, and it was a deal we couldn't pass up. So we thought, okay, we'll just be here a few years. We won't unpack the boxes, that sort of thing, right? And then we'll move back to Brookside.
We'll throw all the boxes in the basement.
Yeah.
Because they had basements. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Or in the attic.
And but then 10 years later, we were still in the same house, and we had a couple kids, and we're growing out of the house.
Yeah.
So you know how life happens.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. So you go to St. Peter's. I know you ended up baking bread with the nuns at St. I mean, I was so afraid of this. Because I was Catholic, cradle Catholic too. Went to St. Bede grade school with the Sisters of St. Joseph, who, discipline was a real thing back then, okay?
Yes.
I'm sure.
And one of my dad's relatives was a sister of St. Joseph as well.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And we had the Sisters of Mercy.
Yes, well, we had, my aunt is a sister of Mercy.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, my mom's sister was a sister of Mercy, so she was a nun as well.
Yeah.
It scared me to death.
Yeah.
I was scared.
Yeah, there was a lot of.
Yeah.
They were good at fear.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, that's one way to keep you disciplined.
That's right.
And and when they say, I'm calling your father and mother, they called your father and mother.
Yes, they did.
And brought him
Absolutely.
in, and that was the wrath of Khan at that point.
But great memories. Great
Yes,
times.
right.
Yeah,
Plus great education.
Yes.
Because you were, you were.
Hey, I still credit them with my love for grammar and being able to diagram a sentence still. So.
Yeah. Dangling participle was not allowed, right?
Yes, right.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, let's talk then from elementary at St. Peter's. You end up at Rockhurst High School, right?
Rockhurst, yeah.
And then on to Marquette and University of New Mexico for your postgraduate degree and stuff. When did you start to really think about doing all of this that you have accomplished since then? Because you were not on that road.
No, I just fell into it. I was a journalist,
yes.
And I was so I moved to New Mexico to. Actually, after I got out of college, I went to New Mexico to work on the Navajo Reservation in western New Mexico. And
you're at Marquette.
So after I graduated Marquette, I went out there and I taught a high school journalism class in this tiny little school on the edge of the reservation. And I started freelance for the Albuquerque Journal. Eventually got a job there. Decided to go to go to grad school there.
Yeah.
And I never thought I would come back to Kansas City. I was so in love with New Mexico, and I thought I'd stay there forever.
Right.
And I moved.
You were driving a school bus too. Weren't you driving the
yeah,
bus?
Yeah, well, a bus. It was yes, it was a van.
You did a little bit of everything.
That we went out onto the res to pick the kids up and bring
Sure.
them into school. I mean, and yeah, muddy, rutted roads and rough. Yeah, I was a bingo caller as well, which is another my claim to fame. I called bingo on Wednesday nights.
Good old Catholic.
Yes, and it was a hoot. It was a tiny little town, about 900 people, but I was like a local celebrity because I was the bingo caller in town. You know,
Yeah.
it was hilarious.
Yeah. So
I
you
loved
started
it.
to write for the Albuquerque Journal, right?
I did, and then I became a staff writer there. Went back to school for my master's, and so what brought me back to Kansas City was to work on my master's thesis, which became the book Ripple.
Right.
And it started as, hey, I want to do a story about the McGonigal family because I knew them growing up.
That's right. Now, remember, this is McGonigal Meats.
Yes.
Such a staple on Ward Parkway. It was there
79th and Ward
forever.
Parkway. Yes.
Just in the last, I guess, maybe 5 or 6 years, they sold out, right? To Fairway, I think,
Right. Yes.
I believe,
Right before a month before the pandemic.
Yes. Right. Great
Mike
timing
sold.
for them.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
It was there for 70 years.
Yes.
Started by Mike McGonigal's dad and Bill. And so I wanted to do their story, and I wanted to do a story kind of just about their family. Because coming from a big family myself, I knew about family dynamics and about sibling, or just about the dynamics in a large family.
Yes, right.
And, anyway, it spun into a bigger story than I ever imagined. But that's what brought me back to Kansas City, and I thought I would be here for about 6 months. And that was in '95. I moved back, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah. Now, the Ripple book, since we've touched on it, it's about Frank McGonigal, who's one of the McGonigal children who disappeared.
Yes.
And
in '82.
Yeah.
And I was still in high school when he left. And being in a tight community like that, everybody knows everybody, right? Everybody knows they were all
Catholic mafia.
Yeah, exactly, right. So when Frank disappeared, it was kind of like, it was like a cousin, or everybody knew about it. Yeah, and so it was something that we kind of kept track of. But he was missing for 9 years. His family looked for him. So by that time, I graduated high school. I went to college. I graduated college. I was and I kind of I'd forgotten about it, and I was visiting back here with my mom. I was visiting my mom from New Mexico when I came back from New Mexico, and it came up, and I thought, hey, whatever happened with that? And then she told me kind of what happened, and I thought, oh, that would make a great story. So I pursued it.
Yeah, right, absolutely. And you were going to do it just as your master's thesis,
Yes,
correct?
correct.
And you had to really ask the family, can I pursue that?
Right.
Do you mind if I do this?
Right.
But getting it to be a book
Yes.
that everyone could read was a different story, wasn't it?
You bet.
It was a lot more difficult.
Yeah, you bet. And it was published 26 years later. So persistence.
Yeah, you are persistent.
Yeah,
Yeah, because you had to get permission from the family too.
Right. And they were great. They were great to work with.
Yeah.
And, So like I said, it turned into a story bigger than me, but it brought me back to Kansas City, and it really reminded me, like, wow, this is a great place. And from there, then I fell into music. Really, I didn't plan on. Yeah,
right. You didn't, and the deal is too. You had jobs in the corporate world. I mean, you worked for Sprint.
Yep.
You worked for Hallmark. You had a couple really good jobs.
Yeah, right.
When you decide,
Right.
what was the decision making process? Not just for you, but also for your wife and your family.
Well, so I was working for a seminar company that was based in Kansas City, and I was teaching classes about writing and grammar and about sales and about how to get along with people at work. And so I was traveling a lot, and I had my own schedule, and it was kind of I could pick and choose my schedule. But about that time, a friend of mine who was working at Barnes & Noble asked me she said, hey, you play the guitar? And I said, well, I barely play the guitar. I know a few chords, and I can play some Irish drinking songs.
You didn't pick it up till what, college?
Yeah, I was 19 when I started playing the guitar.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, I just taught myself. I got a book from the library, literally, and showed me where to put my fingers and on the chord, how to make chords. And so she said, hey, can you come out and do this St. Patrick's Day thing at the bookstore? And I thought, okay, yeah, whatever. I'll sing some songs. And I had written a few songs for my nieces and nephews at the time.
Yeah.
And this is before
Children's
I was married.
songs, right?
Yeah, children's songs.
Yeah.
So I did this, and a couple of parents came up to me after the show and said, hey, do you have a tape or a CD of your music? And I thought, no, never even occurred to me, but now it has. So maybe I'll record an album. And I got some buddies together in a little garage studio in Lawrence, and we recorded my first album. And we thought that would be that, right? We just do an album,
Yeah.
throw it out. Well,
Almost like a Vanity Press
yeah,
type thing,
kind of
right?
like
Yeah.
just whatever. And people loved it, and they bought it, and people started. I started booking more shows at Barnes and Noble, and Borders at the time was open, and libraries. And then people asked for more music, so we recorded another album, and another, and another, and another. Now I've got 10 albums, and working on a new one now. And so what I tell people is that it found me. This career found me. I didn't seek it out. I just kind of fell into it.
Yeah. So you're probably doing a lot of it part-time,
Was.
at nights, weekends, or whatever.
Exactly.
And then because you still have a corporate job,
Yes.
when did you make the final break, and what was that conversation like?
Yeah, so it was about 2000. I was starting. By that time, I had 2 or 3 albums, and I was touring, just regionally.
Yeah.
And I was getting gigs, and I was doing more than 200 gigs a year. And I thought, this is a pretty good gig. I like this. Maybe I can.
The checks are cashing.
Yes,
I'm doing
right.
pretty well here.
Maybe I can, ditch my other job.
Yeah.
But this is all before I was married. So I met my
Okay.
wife. My wife took the job of the friend of mine who worked at Barnes and Noble. So several years later, in 2001 that we met, she hired me to play again at Barnes and Noble. And that's how we met.
Oh,
and
wow.
so she carried my guitar in, and I met her, and I was like, oh, who is this? And so we were married less than, a year later, I think.
Okay.
So that was pretty quick.
Your wife, Jenny.
Jenny, and
yeah.
she, but about a year into our marriage, she said, you're traveling, having all this fun, working with kids. She's like, I want to quit my job and work with you. And I said, that would be awesome. We have your health insurance, plus we have your steadier income than mine. But we took a leap,
Yeah.
and said, okay, let's do it. And we have been working together ever since.
Yeah.
So
Gosh,
it's been awesome.
sometimes that can be a little tricky.
But it was great. Like I tell people, we like each other. So we like hanging
right.
out with each other, and we traveled together. We raised our kids traveling. We raised our kids on the road. And
You have 2 daughters.
we have 2 daughters, yes.
So-
And so Jenny's been my business manager and my booking agent, and the girls were Lida and Willa were part of the show growing up, and
Well, and they're part of your inspiration for the books, right? As well.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So before we go too far, when did the Mr. Stinky Feet come in, and
Oh,
how
yeah.
did you
Right.
How did that moniker go? And
Right.
it was great. I think it's great because people are going to remember that.
Yes.
You know
Oh,
what I mean?
yeah.
it's going to be very, it's going to catch on, boom, like
right.
that. Yeah.
So I was Jim Cosgrove, and the first album I did was called Bop Bop Dinosaur. It was a story about. It's now a book.
Yeah.
It was it's a song about a toy I had when I was a kid, and so that came out, and that people would call me, hey, it's the dinosaur guy, or hey, it's Bop Bop, you're the dinosaur guy. Okay. Then my second album was called Stinky Feet, and I had a friend of mine at the time who was a school teacher, and she said, you want to get kids to laugh? Talk about stinky feet and underwear. And
Yeah.
you've got.
I know one other thing will make them laugh.
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
but-
well, true. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. That still makes adults laugh as
Yes,
well.
exactly. You got it. So I said, okay, I can do that. So I ended up writing a song about Stinky Feet, and the album was called Stinky Feet. So kids started to call me Stinky Feet.
Mr. Stinky Feet instead of Mr. Dinosaur.
Well, it was. So I was in a school. I remember I was playing a school show, and afterwards I was walking the halls. I was heading out, and all these kids saw me in the hall. Hey, Stinky Feet! They were yelling at me, yo, Stinky Feet! And I'm fine. I was like, hey, wait a second, man, that's Mr. Stinky Feet. I mean, doesn't that sound more respectable, right? And it kind of stuck.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I had a little resistance from a few people who, like theater owners, who would hire me. I remember one guy in particular was like, I really don't want to put Stinky Feet on the marquee or whatever. And I thought, okay, well, tell me this. As people are driving down the street and they see Jim Cosgrove on your marquee, are they going to do a double take? Or if they see Mr. Stinky Feet on the marquee, what do you think?
Do a double take.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's like, yeah, I guess you're right. And so it kind of stuck after that.
I have a great friend, been a lifelong friend, met him in the 8th grade, and Chucky Hammer. And you talk about Stinky Feet, okay? So one night, we were in high school, and we went home to his house to stay. One other buddy, myself, and then to Chucky Hammer's house to stay overnight, right? I think we were 16 or 17. I know it sounds strange to be staying overnight at your friend's house when you're 16 or 17, but there was a reason that I didn't want to go home, and my other buddy didn't want to go home, even at 16 or 17. So we go home, and his mom's waiting for us in the door, and she's, God, what have you been doing? You're out late. I can smell that alcohol on your breath. So she's kicking her son up the stairs. Chucky Hammer, you're bad. So we get upstairs to the attic bedroom, and it's freezing up there. It's winter time. And you hear her yell up the steps. She yells up the steps. She goes, Chucky Hammer, don't you forget to put your shoes out on the windowsill, outside the window. And my buddy and I are looking at each other. What? He takes his shoes off, and my eyes started to water. He takes them every night. He had to put them outside on. He was the original Mr. Stinky Feet.
I think there's a story in there with a name like Chucky Hammer. That's great.
It can't be, and you could never, because he was as tough as he sounds.
Right.
Okay, so you never wanted to tease him about Stinky Feet.
Right.
And he wore the same pair of shoes in high school. He wore saddle shoes, the black and white saddle shoes, in an all-boys high school.
Wow.
You can imagine.
You got to be tough to wear those.
You better be tough to wear. Nobody ever said a word about Mr. Stinky Feet from Central Catholic High School.
That's great.
Yeah, it was just classic. But that did stick.
Yeah.
And you're talking about Bop Bop the Dinosaur was the first song that you did. You want to give us a little rendition there?
Bop Bop?
Yeah,
sure.
Give us a little Bop Bop, and then we'll go from there. We'll intermingle here.
Yeah, I can do a little snippet of that.
And what was the inspiration for Bop Bop the Dinosaur?
So I had a little wind-up toy dinosaur, and I just had this, wanted to tell a story about it. And he had a little buddy who was a plastic polar bear and a grasshopper. And one night they were sitting on my bed on the table next to my bed. And they woke me up in the middle of the night. They were singing and dancing on the table next to my bed in their underwear. Yeah. So this song came out. So your part goes like this. Bop, bop, dinosaur, bop, bop, polar bear, bop, bop, grasshopper, dancing in their underwear. And, of course, the kids shout out the word underwear, and it's a great deal.
Yeah.
There's a wind-up dinosaur sitting on my clock, a green grasshopper that spits and hops, a white polar bear with his nose in the air. They make a lot of noise, but I don't care. Well, they love to hop and they love to bop. They bop all around on my tabletop. Sometimes they dance while I'm asleep. When I wake up, they're laying in a heap. All right, here's your part. We go bop, bop, dinosaur, bop, bop, polar bear, bop, bop, grasshopper, dancing in their underwear. Yes, they bop, bop up. They bop, bop down. They bop in circles and they bop all around. Yeah, and then I go and tell my mom and dad about it, and they don't believe me. Okay. So I do a little something to help them believe me. And that's the Bop Bop Dinosaurs.
There you go.
Yeah.
See that?
Uh-huh.
So the thing you did for them to believe you was write the song.
Ultimately.
Sure.
But I put those animals by their bed. Snuck in there and put it next to their bed, and then they'll see what happens.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you're very, I know your philosophy in life is twofold. Number one, be vulnerable, which
absolutely.
children are at that point. But also to be childlike, but not childish.
Yes.
And I think that has been your whole persona about, about life.
Yes.
And being happy.
Yes.
Through all of the roller coaster that is life.
I mean, you know as well as I do that kids have a lot to teach us, right?
Yeah.
And
if we observe.
If we observe, right, and if we're open to it, and it doesn't take about much, really. I mean, but they live here and now.
Right.
They have forgotten about the temper tantrum they threw 30 minutes ago. They have no concept of tomorrow,
Right.
because it's
tomorrow.
Yeah, it's tomorrow. What is tomorrow? Is that a year from now? What is that? I don't even know. But they're always here, and they deal with things as they come. Emotions. If they get angry, they get angry, but then they move on. If they get sad, they get sad. And they, there's that. Just the lesson of being here and now is so important, I think, for adults, clearly, and just joy, man. They're just they're all about joy and having fun, and so it's been great working with them. They keep me grounded.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And to keep coming up with different aspects of what you're trying to teach, because each story teaches something a little different, right? Bop Bop the Dinosaur is read along, sing along fun.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And then you have here Sullen Sally, not Mustang Sally, but Sullen Sally, and she talks about friendship.
Yes.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And then you have Hark, it's Harold the Angel. That's, practice, and that gives you confidence.
Gives
right?
you confidence.
Yeah,
That's right.
And then
you got that.
Then you have a bunch of essays about everybody's got stinky feet.
Yes, right. Yeah, and that was fun. I was a parenting columnist for the Kansas City Star for a while.
Yes.
And it was a great gig because they let me write about whatever I wanted to write about.
But it was always about kids and parenting and how to
about my family or the family, my Jenny and the girls and I, or about my family of origin. And then I wrote about kids I met on the road traveling and experiences I had. And so they kind of gave me free reign. And it was really fun. It was fun putting that together. And then it's a collection of some of my columns from the Star.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, we're talking 95 when you first really kicked off.
Yes,
stuff,
right.
Well,
yeah, it was when I started doing. Well, my first album came out in 98.
98.
So
okay.
97,
right
was when I first started playing.
Yeah, so you saw them at one point, kids like this, and they inspired all these things.
Yeah.
What has changed? I know social media has changed, but what has changed to take a lot of that innocence away from those young kids?
Kids are kids, and they always have been, and they always will be, and which is great. I might lose. I say lose them. They might drift in their interest a little earlier than
they used to.
Yeah, and we'll hang on to. Girls tend to have a better focus than boys do.
Really?
We kind of tend to lose.
Really?
Yes. We lose.
Yeah, you're really focused.
We lose the boys. We lose the boys a little more quickly than we do the girls. But still, I got to think there's not a whole lot of huge difference. A little attention span, of course, has dipped a little bit. And I see it in schools a lot now, and really post-pandemic. And I kind of think we're coming out of that. At least I hope. Post-pandemic, man, it was just I saw a lot of kids. I saw a lot of kids with like deer in headlights. With like when we started to gather again and do shows, public shows, a lot of kids like, what are all these people doing in this room with me? Like, who are like? It was a bit overwhelming for sensory overload, But I think we're seeing a little bit of that.
Yeah, just imagine if you went in the pandemic at 6, and you came out at 10.
Right.
I mean, I can't even fathom because where we were when we were 6 years old and we were 10 years old, and just the total difference.
Prime learning time and
developing your personality and the whole thing. Yeah.
So I have recently have doubled down. I think my attitude, considering the stress that kids are picking up from their parents. Mm-hmm. The kids pick up on everything parents are feeling. They're magnets for that because they're super intuitive and they're tuned into now. So they know when we're stressed. And there's been so much chaos and stress lately that I have just doubled down on being like leading with love. Like that's going to be my deal, and joy and working with kids. And I'm going to sweep my corner of the world by focusing on that.
You're right. You can't fix everybody.
No, right.
And so if you do concentrate on that, you're going to, everybody says if you help just one person,
yes,
you have done
Yeah.
tremendous. But obviously, you're helping a lot more than just one person.
Well,
at this point.
and, you never know, right?
Right.
And we recently did a show. Jenny, my wife, was for years had said, you need to do an adult show, like for all your original fans.
yes,
So
right.
last year we did a over 21 show. And well, it started as an over 21 show, and then several people were like, hey, I'm 19. I still would like to come to that show. So we lowered it to 18 and over. And my band played with me, and it wasn't a huge crowd, but it was a fully into it crowd. And so there were 50 and 60 somethings with their grown children coming to the show.
Who had heard it as children.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, right.
And so, but I remember at that show, there were three different individuals, three different 20-somethings who came up to me and said, the reason I'm in music now is because I was in your band when I was a kid. You inspired me. I'm now teaching music. I am now performing music. I was like, wow, that's...
What's that make you feel like?
Oh, it's awesome. It is so cool. People always ask me, does it make you feel old if these kids are bringing their kids now? No, man, I love... So I'm seeing the next generation come.
Yeah. Has your music changed at all, or do you still try to keep that same level of music?
Yeah.
And teaching through music.
Right.
That
It evolves a little bit. I didn't know what I was doing when I started. And there's a beauty in that, right? I didn't know about music. I was not musically trained. I taught myself to play the guitar. I just wrote what came to me. And I hadn't had kids yet.
Yeah,
but
right.
I'm the youngest of 8, so all my siblings had kids before me. I was the uncle with the guitar. But then when I had my own kids, then the writing changed a little bit, became a little bit more biographical, little bit more.
Did it grow with them?
It did.
As they aged.
It did
the
a little.
music aged.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Indeed. And then as I grew musically, I surrounded myself with people who, and I do this in my life. I surround myself with people who are a lot smarter than me and who are better than me. Yeah. So when I went and now my bandmates who have been with me for 2 decades, they are fabulous musicians, and they have helped me grow as a musician. And so now I do more. They're more interesting compositions, I think.
Yeah, sure. And who I saw the list of people. You can also chime in on this. The list of people who influenced you.
Oh,
as far as your music concerned.
Yes.
You're back to the Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, and
right?
Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Joni Mitchell and Jimmy Buffett.
Yes.
The group you fail to mention. I lived in San Francisco for 2 years. So who is the group you sort of failed to mention there was sort of inspiring to you? Was the Grateful Dead.
Yes, right. Well, and it's interesting. There's a song off of an album we put out 2 years ago that really is, it's called Plenty of Love.
Okay.
And it's about opening up your doors and letting people in. But if you listen to it, it is a full-on Grateful Dead song.
Yeah.
It is inspired
You want
by
to give
them.
us a little of that, or can you... Is that one a little bit too difficult to play, or?
No.
Okay.
Can,
yeah. And Ripple, remember, the title of the book is from a Grateful Dead song.
Yes, right.
There was a song called Ripple.
Right.
On a Grateful Dead album.
Probably, yes, and perhaps their most famous song. And Frank McGonigal was a huge Grateful Dead fan.
Yeah, right. And it was the song was written by Robert Hunter, who's
Yes.
their lyricist.
Yes.
Okay. And he wrote Ripple, Broke Down Palace, and Lay Me Down, which are three of the most famous Grateful Dead songs in one day when he was drinking Retsina, right? Retsina.
Right.
He was drinking that Greek wine,
my gosh.
Retsina.
Okay, so I have a wild story to tell about Robert Hunter and this book. So
That's great.
I was in Tulsa doing some shows, and I did a book presentation for the Tulsa Press Club. Mm-hmm. They got a cool old place there, and I was doing a presentation, and it's in the press club is open to the public to come in as a bar there. Sure. And so I'm doing my presentation on Ripple, and people are asking questions, and I see that this guy comes in and sits at the bar, and he's kind of interested. So he walks up to me afterwards, and he said, "You wrote this book, Ripple?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "My biological father is Robert Hunter."
Oh my God!
And I was like, what? He said, now I say that because he really was not in my life.
Yeah,
at all.
right. Well, he was a biological father.
Yeah, but
and,
he's
and so was Garcia, Weir, the whole group.
Yeah.
They're a lot.
Right.
They are biological father for a lot of
yes,
people.
right.
From the San Francisco Bay Area.
But he said, he said, I got to get this book. And so I got a picture with him. And I went and I looked up Robert Hunter's photo, and this guy was a spitting image of his dad. Yeah. And just like, what a bizarre coincidence. And this guy was from Dallas, and he was in town doing some business and had just stopped in for a drink at the bar. And there, so.
Yeah, I saw them play one time. I lived in San Francisco for 2 years.
Yeah.
I saw them back in October of '74 at Winterland.
Oh, wow.
I saw them at Winterland. That was the only time. And that was when you walk in the building back in those days. They lived on Asbury Street,
Yes.
which Asbury was right there.
Yeah.
And everybody knew where they lived and the whole deal. But I went into Winterland, and I came out, and you can imagine the smoke-filled room and what that smoke was in those days. So it was that was my first experience ever with marijuana.
Yeah.
Which I just had been there. I wasn't smoking it, but
And
you
now it's
didn't have
everywhere.
to. You didn't have to. Now it's everywhere,
that's
right? It's,
right.
never mind. It's like fly poop, as we say, but that's
right.
it's everywhere at this point.
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, so this song was just about opening up your doors and letting people in, and so pull back the curtains, sweep the floor, set the table and open the door. Everyone's welcome to come on in, 'cause we got plenty of love, love, love. Fill your cup and load your plate. Have a second helping, don't hesitate. Swing by early or drop in late, 'cause we got plenty of love, love, love. Love, love, shout it out loud. Love, love, loud and proud. Love, love, shout it out loud, 'cause we got plenty of love, love, love. Yeah, we got plenty of love, love, love. Now, I often finish my shows with that song, or I'd have another love song that I finish, and I ask kids to go out and get a grown-up that you came with and bring them up on stage. Oh, wow. And we do a big family jam at the end. And I always finish with the love song because, well, you can't have enough love songs.
Yeah.
And it's a family
Silly
jam.
love songs.
Yes, right. And so I said, now go and take that love and take it out in the world. Share it with the world, you know. And it is so great to get families up and having kids, you know, like, and I have the parents look at the kids and we say, I love you, and, you know.
A lot of crying going on at that point. Yeah, there's a lot of crying going on at that point, I'm sure.
Oh,
there's a few tears shed, I'll bet. And you are an inspirational speaker, and you speak to corporations. You speak to adults.
I do.
About
which is
this message, which I think a lot of us have lost as we've gone along. I don't think you keep people around you who are negative and not on the same. I think you shed those pretty quickly, right? And
they certainly you know, spin it in my sphere sometimes.
Yeah, they are. I know you're praying for them and singing about love, but if you ain't on board, hit the bricks, will you, pal? You're gone.
You got it.
So what is your speech to the adults when you talk about adults?
So it you know, dawned on me after, I mean, I've spent time in corporate, right? I worked for Sprint early on in my career as a writer and a spokesperson. I worked at Hallmark as an editor, and so I worked in big corporate environments. And so it dawned on me that, wait, kids have a lot to teach us as adults, certainly, but a lot to teach us about business, about leadership, about being present right here, right now, and like you said earlier, about being childlike, but not childish. There's a big difference, and having that childlike mentality of openness, willing to change, willing to learn, you know, being a sponge,
be vulnerable,
and which allows for allows for growth. And so it's been interesting. I have now given this presentation for a lot of teachers and librarians and that sort of thing, but also a lot of corporations. In fact, it got me my job at Hallmark. I did a presentation there, and they came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about working here?" And I said, "No."
Do you know how to write a greeting card?
Well, I ended up doing that too.
I'll bet you did. Can you remember one that you wrote?
Oh
Because
gosh,
those
no.
greeting. Oh, you
well,
can't.
because I
Yeah.
didn't start. Actually, I started as an editor.
Okay.
But then I ended
So
up.
you're reading other people's
Yeah.
ideas and then.
But I did end up
Making
writing a few
oh,
that,
sure.
that ended up in the
I'll bet it had a lot
system.
to do with
Yeah.
all the stuff that,
Yes, yeah,
that,
you
that
bet.
you've done. Yeah. You've had some other interesting situations. How about playing with the Kansas City Symphony?
Yes.
How was that?
Oh my word! So for a guy who's not musically trained, it was terrifying because I'm a hack-it, as my bandmates will tell you. They're constantly having to clean up after me as I like, because I'll throw in a half a measure when I'm supposed to play a full
Yeah,
measure,
sure,
or I just
sure.
and they kind of wing it and follow me. But when you play
You're
with the
used to
symphony,
yeah.
you've got to play every note. I mean, they follow the notes, they
Stick
follow the
to
dots,
the
stick
script.
to the script, and there's no variance, right? So it was an 80-piece orchestra behind us, and it was phenomenal. So we did a few shows when they were performing at Johnson County Community College before the Kauffman Center was built.
Yes,
but
right.
but that first season of the Kauffman Center, my band and I did a show with them, and it was amazing. And I remember my mother. I always tell the story about my mom because when I first played my song "Stinky Feet" for her, she was like, "That's awful. Nobody's gonna want to hear that." She's like, that is awful. Only as a mother could say, right?
Of
Right.
course, yeah.
And
Jim.
yeah, she's like, oh. So we are. So I set up that song. I said, and she was in the audience, and I said, "Mom, remember? You remember who told me? Well, hey, I've got an 80-piece orchestra behind me right now. We're about to do this song that you said nobody would want to hear." Oh boy. So afterwards, I said, "So what'd you think?" She said, "Well, the orchestra helped." I said,
Hey, you did
Yeah.
call out Mom, though, in front of the whole audience, so you weren't going to get a whole lot of love there.
Well, it's I still don't get it. But,
Yeah, I understand.
Having a symphony behind you helps.
And you have played 5,000
Yes.
performances, at least 38 states, 6 countries. You even, for the Department of Defense, you went over
Yes.
and entertained the troops
Yep,
as well,
yep.
and their families,
Right.
which is
We did
phenomenal.
schools.
What was that like?
It was a really an amazing honor for sure. However, the first time we went was 3 weeks after 9/11.
Oh, wow.
So it was we had already had it scheduled. Everything was on board. So we didn't know if we were going to be able to go, for one. If air travel, we were going to be able to do it. And if the bases would allow people on because they were at high alert.
High level.
And so nobody from the outside was allowed in. But just prior to us going, that dropped down a notch. And so my drummer and I went, and it was, we were overwhelmed by the outpouring of the folks. We played in Germany on that trip. My drummer left, and I went on to Italy and played in Italy at some schools. But just a tremendous experience, yeah.
Yeah, the military's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
They're incredible people. You know,
Oh, man.
That's total dedication
Yes,
to the country. When you put
indeed.
your life on the line.
Indeed.
You know, every day. And then bring your family and your wife and your
Yeah.
children with you. And the
Right.
whole thing it is, pull them up every
Yes.
2 or 3 years. And you're in Greece,
Oh.
now you're in Germany, and now we're back in Texas.
Uh-huh.
We're in San Diego. We're somewhere.
Those kids that
Just travel.
I've met who are like, yeah, this is my 7th school.
Yeah,
And,
right.
You know,
I speak 4 languages.
70s, yes, right,
It's the whole
right.
deal. And you were at the White House Easter egg roll, not once,
yes,
but twice. What presidents?
Bush it was 05 and 06.
Okay.
And the first year we got, excuse me, we got 1.5 songs in, and the skies opened up, poured. So I think they felt bad for us. They brought us back the next year.
Oh, God,
so
that's awesome.
So we played the first year was a hoot and wet, and then we were invited back the next year and played, and that was cool. We played on the south lawn of the White House, which was pretty
how
awesome.
good is that?
Yeah, it was cool.
And I've been in the Rose Garden, not once, but once, and then the second time we were in when the Royals won the second time with Hosmer and that group. That was indoors. But a White House lawn when George Brett did. You got to tell the story about George Brett.
Oh yes.
I got the bat here, but let's talk about before the bat or during the bat or whenever the bat. But talk about your relationship with George Brett.
Okay, so I was the summer of '78. I turned 13 that spring. It was the spring actually of '78. I turned 13 that year, and my dad came home from work, and his buddy was the lawn guy for Ewing Kauffman. in
Wasn't George Toma?
no,
Oh my
gosh,
gosh.
I'm blanking on his name now.
That's okay.
Yeah, but
That's okay.
but he worked for the Kaufmans, and so he said, hey, he told me that George Brett is moving into our neighborhood. He was moving into Brookside.
Brookside, yeah, that was his first house.
Yeah, and he'd been kicking around for a couple years at that point, of course, and so he said, and he's looking for somebody to cut his grass, and I told him that you were available, and he said, all you got to do is go over there and introduce yourself, and you're in, And I said, oh, well, okay.
Sure, why not?
But as typical from my old man, he's like, remember, you are there to do a job. You are not to take advantage of him or the situation at all.
Right.
You go in, you do your work, and you get out.
Don't ask for autographs.
Don't
be
ask
a
for
pest.
don't right. Just you do what you. So I went, got the job, and I remember I looked at the lawn and front yard, backyard, and he asked me to give him an estimate, and I said $20. And he's like,
I was
great.
just gonna say $20.
So I cut the grass, and afterwards he gave me $40, and I said, oh. Again, thinking of my dad, not taking advantage of it. Well, I remember we agreed to $20, and he said, "Yeah, 20 for the front, 20 for the back." And I said, "Yes, exactly right." Okay, I'm in, and I'm like,
and this is 78,
and I'm making
before,
$40 an hour now.
exactly.
At 13,
Yeah. And this is 1978 before we knew George Brett was going to be George Brett.
Well, but
He
at
was
this
still-
time, he had been on Fantasy Island. He had been attacked by Morgana, the kissing bandit.
That's
He had
right.
been,
That's right, yeah.
and shown himself in the series. But I mean, in the ACL,
ACLs.
yeah, right. And so that summer, I worked for him, cut his grass, cleaned up after his parties.
Yeah, and he lived with Jamie Quirk.
He lived with
That's
Jamie
before
Quirk,
Jamie was married.
and
George didn't get married till after he was done his career.
right.
But Jamie lived with him. And then he had Clint Hurdle and
Clint
half
Hurdle
the team
lived there.
crashing there.
Joe
from
Zeb
time to
was there
time,
for a
right?
little
Yeah.
bit. A couple other guys came in, crashed. Jamie was great whenever. A lot of times he would like catch me at the front door. He's like, George is not in a good mood today, so I'm handling it. It is like
I've seen that,
Jamie
George.
was great. So, but it was a great, of course, a great experience. I'm
God,
and I was playing. So I was playing Little League baseball at the time, and I was not very good, but I was playing Little League baseball. And after the '78 series, he cleaned out his locker, and this was the series where they lost to the Yankees again. But it was that series, that game where he hit 3 home runs off Catfish Hunter. Still lost the game.
Right.
Anyway, he comes home and he said, "Hey, do you want one of my bats?" So he gave me this bat, which I promptly went home with. I took it home and started hitting tennis balls over the hedge of my yard with it. So, because that's what you do with a bat.
Yeah, absolutely. Or
So-
a ball, the autograph, or anything else.
Right.
We're going to lose it eventually.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
So but he also offered me a glove, one of his gloves. And at that point, I was like, well, thank you. I'm okay. And I'm thinking my dad, like, don't. I said, I have a glove. It was one of those really nice Rawlings
Yeah,
gloves.
sure.
It was one of his,
Yeah.
I had my JCPenney special, which was all tattered. And
Yeah.
I'm good. Thanks. I kicked myself. I should have accepted the glove at the time. But
That would have been worth way more than the $40 for the lawn.
yes,
Okay,
of
eventually.
course, you bet. So, but I never got this bat autographed. And the week before our wedding, actually a few days before our wedding, Jenny snuck the bat out of our house, and she coordinated with a friend of hers, her family who knew George, for us to go over there. And she said, "I'm taking you somewhere." And she made it a surprise, and we drove up. We pulled up, and I'm like, "Oh, this is George's house." And,
Yeah.
so she took the bat in, and he autographed it for me just a
Right in
couple
front
days
of you?
before our wedding.
God,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. So
awesome.
the autograph that's on there is from.
It's good.
from
You know,
that
he
time.
never forgets.
Yeah.
People, he never forgets
Yeah.
friends. You can see George autographed up here. Ben, you see that okay? And then on the end of the bat, you can see if I turn it up right, which way? I think
Yeah.
it's this way. You can see there's his number 5 that he marks all his bats with.
He's number 5. That's right. And there is just a very slight remnant
There's a
that you
crack
can
there, right?
see. Oh, is there? Oh, God, I hope not.
Go ahead. Show me the remnant.
Where I saw it earlier today when I took this down, there is a little remnant of pine tar.
Oh, it's
Right
right there.
here, right
Yes,
here.
you're right. It's
Yes.
right there. That's awesome. Little pine tar.
Yeah. There
Which
was
he
a
got
little bit more
trouble
on it.
for with
Yes,
Billy Martin
right.
a few years later, but that
Yeah,
is,
right.
That's incredible, and the fact that he
Yeah.
ended up autographing that for you as well.
Yeah,
So that
but
is-
some great experience, and of course, the coolest thing as a 13-year-old to be able to do that. Yeah, right.
and to always have that.
Yeah.
And for him to personalize it like that.
Yes.
I think I'll read it here. Let me do that. It says Jim, my best to you, George Brett, 1976, 2002.
Yeah. Now he put 2002 was
Because
the year
that
he
was-
signed it. That was
Yeah,
the year
that's
he
the
signed it.
So
Yeah,
76 is the year he got it. And this was
Right.
the bat that he used against the Yankees in the ALCS, right?
Well, yeah.
You know what?
Yes.
Hey, Jim.
Yes,
this is
it
the
is.
bat he used against the Yankees.
Yes, it is.
You're going to catch on eventually.
Yes,
Forget
it
about
is.
your dad here for a second. Put
You
him in
got
there.
it.
Compartmentalize your father.
Well, and as he pointed out, this was the bat prior to. They of course made a special limited George that he used forever, but this was the early edition of his bat.
Yeah, right. Which is just that's
Yeah.
incredible. You probably have a lot of stories like that. You
Oh,
probably
man.
have a few about the people you've met.
Yes.
and done things
It's
with.
been a
And
great.
this
I
is
tell you
just-
what, it's been a great gig.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And I gotta say, I mean, back to Kansas City, I don't know if I could have pulled this off anywhere else. I mean,
you're
Kansas
absolutely
City,
right.
just because of the roots I have here and the family, just the family orientation it has here and the love and it's been great.
I think the big thing for you too was you went to New Mexico. You thought, okay, this is great. Love
Yeah.
the Southwest.
Yes, no humidity.
You know, no humidity. I'm up to Navajo Nation teaching kids off the res and having a great time writing for the Albuquerque Journal when I have to. And then all of a sudden you came back home.
Yeah.
And I think, and I know you believe this, that's what Kansas City's all about.
Yes, you got
That's
it.
why we did this. There's just something about Kansas City.
And
It's a special place.
for sure, and so many great things are happening right now.
Yeah.
And are going to continue to happen. I mean, 2026 is going to be an amazing year for Kansas City.
That will be
Look out,
with the World Cup here.
Yeah.
Plus, we've already had the draft and
Oh.
the Super Bowl wins.
Yeah,
And, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and
bet.
Tay-Tay.
Yeah, Tay, right. You got it.
There's the deal. There's your next next album.
So my dream,
Here we
truly,
go.
my dream is to make, and you're hearing it here. My dream is to make Kansas City Kid City, KC, USA, and have it. Now that we have the Rabbit Hole, which is a world class attraction, we have great places like Science City and Wonderscope Children's Museum, and we
Toy
have
and
a
miniatures.
solid toy and miniature museum. We got a solid kids music scene here. We used to host, Jenny and I, with the Irish Fest people, we used to host the largest kids music festival in the country, was here for 8 years, and we're talking about reviving that. So I would love to make Kansas City Kid City, USA. And
you're right, because I don't think, you travel all over the world.
Yeah.
You've probably never seen a children's music scene like you've seen here in Kansas City, which you have been part of and
Yeah.
maybe even helped spawn here in KC as well. So,
Well, and Jenny and I decided early on as the scene was growing, is that we're not competing. If you're working, I'm working. So all boats rise. So we decided to help all the other acts out. We'll help book you shows. We will help, nobody wants to listen to the same music every single day, right?
That's right.
So
That's Creed's Arms Wide Open, isn't it?
Yeah,
At that
absolutely.
point, right?
You
That's
got
what
it.
It's all about. So, Jim, can't thank you enough for coming in.
Hey, thank
bringing
you.
your guitar, bringing
Yeah.
your bat, bringing your music, bringing your love and your whole persona about what's right in Kansas City. And just tell you're such a positive guy that I don't think anything gets you down, and I think that's important. And you and your wife and your kids and the music scene is just another one of those reasons why there's just something about Kansas City.
Kansas City.
Thanks so much.
Kansas City rocks.
There's Just Something About Kansas City is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization with the mission of documenting the stories that have built our city to inspire and educate generations to come. Our work is being made possible by the generous support of local partners like you. You can help us share these stories by becoming a sponsor today. Visit somethingaboutKC.org to learn more.